Buonasera, come sapete, alcuni di voi meglio di altri, Buone Nuove è una mostra in cui abbiamo invitato alcuni architetti, gruppi di architette, gruppi, diciamo, coppie, collettivi a mostrare il loro lavoro, perché ci sembrava giusto dare un ventaglio dei molti modi in cui la professione dell'architetto sta cambiando, influenzata anche dalla crescita e dalla maggiore importanza di una presenza di una diversità di genere maggiore. Poi però abbiamo anche raccontato le storie di una novantina di architette, in questo caso o collettivi o coppie, che lungo tutto il Novecento, a partire dalla prima laureata in architettura, che è del 1894, sto sbagliando sicuro, ed è in Finlandia, come diciamo abbiamo mappato una novantina di storie e di racconti che fanno emergere un pochino il contributo di un mondo fatto anche di donne, di collettivi, di coppie, in cui la presenza femminile era importante. Tra le 11 architette a cui abbiamo chiesto di mostrare in maniera più forte, più importante il loro lavoro, c'è Anupama Kundo, che ci sembrava un caso molto interessante. Anupama è nata in India, ha studiato prima in India e poi in Germania, ha lavorato intorno a una specie di traduzione utopista, no? Che c'è in India, ad Auroville e anche nei luoghi da cui lei proviene, però poi si è interessata allo stesso tempo all'architettura alla scala molto materiale, delle materie prime, della costruzione, del dettaglio, dell'artigianato. E poi però è venuta in Europa, ha imparato a ragionare anche in maniera più complessa sul ruolo sociale dell'architettura, il ruolo dello spazio pubblico, la città. Insomma è ormai un architetto molto importante che ha appena avuto una grande mostra al Museo Louisiana e quindi per noi era una presenza molto importante. Credo che la modalità di questa conversazione sarà una conversazione, però chiediamo ad Anupama prima di farci vedere un po' del suo lavoro. So I just placed you in your history, and I explain how important is your presence in the show. And please go on. You're welcome.
Okay, so good evening and thank you for having me here. And I'm going to try today to just, because of the context in Rome, where the Nervi projects are also preserved, I thought of showing here in this place the part of my work and research that links to what Nervi had done as a tribute to his work, because I really believe in Nervi's research that it could hold some clue for the future to use cement more consciously and to significantly reduce the amount of cement that is used. And I believe in sustainability's approach through human ingenuity, by using less, instead of saying this is a good material, that is a bad material. I think all materials...
Let me say one thing, which is importante, che Anupama si è laureata in Europe, in TU Berlin, nella scuola di Technische University in Berlino. Nell'altra mostra abbiamo una installazione della Technische University di Berlino che lavora proprio sulla leggerezza del cemento, quindi la continuità, no? The continuity of this research is very, very important. So.
Yeah. So, and I thought, okay, it's a small space and I want to still show something in 1-to-1 scale, because that's where you understand whether the spatial concepts with the material concepts, what it really does, the law of gravity and everything in 1-to-1, only it works, not in another material. So I managed to show that, but I will just explain few things, how with ferrocement, how we could go beyond Nervi and not forget the research of Nervi is for me very important, because I see a big promise through the plasticity of this material ferrocement, which I think the architectural world has forgotten about, but it is all over here, you know, and I think we should look at it with new eyes. So I think ferrocement, the way I understand I have been doing 30 years of research in this material, and I think that the beginnings comes from a kind of earth construction called wattle and daub, where when you use very thin, not massive earth construction, but very thin, light earth construction, it's like you make a weave of any fiber and you put earth on two sides as a plaster. I think that's how ferrocement idea began, because in France they started discovering that if they want to do in landscape design, that to make large pots, they discovered with lime plaster and all that, they discovered that you can put some reinforcement of thin chicken mesh. It's like when you break your hand and you make a plaster, a fabric helps to keep the compression materials with some tension, very light reinforcement. So I started, when I was doing workshops with my students in Bombay many years ago already, to investigate this material. And just for those of you who don't know, I just want to, without explaining too much, that ferrocement used to be used very, very early on for boat building, before Nervi, who actually demonstrated that for roof structures, ferrocement has the potential to optimize reinforced cement concrete. So Nervi's buildings were not ferrocement, but they were reinforced cement concrete that was being used efficiently. So he used to make, concrete has one problem, that the bigger the span, the more energy you put in its own self-weight, and for that you have to make the beams very heavy, and then it's heavy, so the beams have to be more heavy, and it just spends most of the energy carrying its own weight. So Nervi used a combination of efficient forms and the slab, he tried to make it light by using mesh instead of steel, and then try to make the concrete very light. So then the beams could be light, and the pillars could be light, and the foundation could be light. So this part of his work I am still building upon. And you know it, but I'm just putting it here as reminders. So the beams and all the structural elements in his work, because he had to deal with big spans, they are reinforced concrete. But the slab between them is ferrocement, but he used the ferrocement in a way to make the form and to perfectly create a formwork for ferrocement, for pouring the concrete, which, you know, it's very coincidental. I have not seen the exhibition, and I just passed it now. I was always waiting to see this. And yes, so I'm just recalling some images so that you can see how other ferrocement, how buildings, unfortunately, did not continue to be researched in this direction after the 60s, because my conclusion today, I just have some answers. Earlier I had only questions. It took me years to contemplate. But I think it is because, just like mud architecture and ferrocement and every kind of form, where form gives the strength, it requires much more complex calculation. Even to do Notre Dame today, any arch and vault, you need more knowledge. You just cannot put it in a software and it will give you a ready-made 2-minute Maggi solution, how much to mix. I believe that people are, on one hand, not knowing anymore how to do it, and on the other hand, a bit lazy, and on the third hand, the norms, they make an excuse to be not innovative. But there is no reason why in the 60s, when ferrocement was understood by many other architects like Candela and many other people to be, this is not ferrocement, this was thin concrete, but the principles were embedded. And the people in those days were not wasting material in order to save time. Then they, after industrialization, they made the motto, time is money. And I ask myself always, what is the cost of saving the time? Today we know that to save time is very expensive. If you take 2 times the time to think, you will use less materials. So human resources are infinite and natural resources are finite. Why are we in a big hurry to save the time to think? Because if you spend the time to think, to spend your time, your muscle, all the human resources, all your care, all your repair, all the human attention and love and everything we give, it only makes us better humans, it makes us clever, it makes us more strong. If you want to save any human engagement by giving it to the machine, you'll end up making standardized solutions and you use a lot more material, whether it is wood or mud or anything, because we want standard. All the clothes are SML, so it fits nobody. Everything is comfortable for the machine. So maybe the time has come to think about this. So I believe that that's where I feel Nervi's work is relevant, because up to that point, humans were appreciating architecture where there was ingenuity. After that, we have become superficial in the renderings. We are bored and we want it to look seductive, but we know that internally nothing new is going on. And we feel more and more not empowered. So I've just put all of these these are all forms by Hans Eisler and other architects who investigated things, but these are not necessarily ferrocement, but they could have been made in ferrocement. But these are the right forms for ferrocement. So basically, I'm just saying that ferrocement, because in concrete, the bigger the span, you have to put in more steel to make it take the tension. In ferrocement, it is always 1 inch, 2.5 centimeters thick and not more. If it's more than that, it starts to behave like concrete. So if I take a thin piece of paper, it will hang. But if I fold a paper as an arch, it will stand. That's how the material doesn't have to change. The more you fold it, the more it becomes strong. You have to bend or the form gives strength. So this is the beginning of the problem, and I think for architects it's very interesting. So I want to have time for the discussion. I'm just showing the images quickly, that ferrocement is so easy to do that anybody anywhere could actually do it. And it's every household material, like mesh. You don't need to go to a big chicken mesh. In every village you can buy it. You don't need to go to some very fancy store. So, and the tools are there. And sorry for the very ugly photos, by the way, in a museum. I'm embarrassed to show, but I quickly put some engineering things where the strength comes, the being thin demands that the form is bent. No? So it is a study in all that. So I want to bring in another line of my research, which has brought what I've shown here, and that is the work of Roger Anger, I wrote this book about him. Next year is his centenary, so I'm also producing some material, hoping to exhibit and show. He's another architect, like Nervi, I think, who are very genius, who used similar methods to design for the future. He has worked with all sorts of materials, and he has designed this city, Auroville, which now I have since 8 months. I am appointed as the head of urban design for that city, and this model has been just exhibited in MoMA. Okay, so anyway, I just want to give the background now, because he did other things than Nervi in ferrocement. So I actually worked with him, and I discovered the things he did beyond Nervi. And I tried to do beyond them, like knowing what they're doing. So he experimented in all kinds of materials. I'm just giving you some glimpse. He has worked with gold, polyester, anything, just about any material. He has researched it. And this is the ferrocement work that he did. Now, what he did was he did not use concrete beams and columns and ferrocement in between. Look, the whole roof, it is 13 meters. 13 meters. I have here 4 meters, no? He has done 13 meters with 2.5 centimeter, same thickness. The entire architecture is ferrocement. So I think this architect deserves to be shown, and the solo shows everywhere. I'm happy to tell you a prompt, because I think we have been appreciating a different kind of stars at the moment who are not helping us with our environmental problem. But there are other architects who are equally modernist and artistic, but I just quickly explain a few images of what kind of architecture. Now I'm showing you only what Roger Anger did with ferrocement. These roofs are not so fat. They are actually the form, bending. to make it possible. At the same time, all of these forms were to collect rainwater because of the monsoon. Okay? So this is what he did in the 70s. There is a lot of work. And other architects in Auroville and non-architects started using ferrocement in hundreds of ways. These are all without architects. Architecture without architects. Because chicken mesh has to be bent and plaster has to be just applied on two sides. That's it. So you can actually manufacture it in situ or you can prefabricate it. There's a lot of ugly buildings also, I have to admit. But people are able to just have fun with it and they are able to solve a shelter problem. So this is what are the things I have seen all kinds of people applying. And so they make a form, cast a channel, and you just put it up. It can take a few days only to do. So I was very impressed with all these things. Sorry for the ugly slides. These are from my 30-year-old archives. They are doing steps. Okay, this, for example, it's a foundation in a water basin so that the scorpions and ants don't come. So you make a tub of water and then you build on top of it. So people have just a prefabricated toilet, 2 channels, hinged. So I don't want to show my work in isolation, you know, because the whole collective is all the time generating ideas. These are biogas plants and all kinds of things that the hippies did in Auroville long ago, including some cow sheds which are made with jute fabric that you just dip it in the cement milk and put it on the thing. So I was looking at all these things with an engineering eye. And then when I was 23 and I moved to Auroville and I got my first project, I was very lucky. And I decided to weave the mesh also myself because I found that the mesh also has an engineering role. And in India, you know, I don't believe I was doing this thing now when I look at it. It looks exotic. But I started exploring with students all kinds of shapes and forms that self-support, okay? And at that time, there was not a very strong culture not like Germany. In India, we say, I built it, but actually someone else built. You only, you know, you don't put your hands in the architects don't touch the matter as such. So we started doing that kind of things in workshops. And again, as you see here, sometimes I was asking them to study the forms that Nervi had generated, and I was all the time trying to improve. And then I came across a book which the US National Academy of Sciences had published in 1973 that ferrocement they wrote about ferrocement, that it has an absolute potential for developed countries because anyone can do it and all those things I told you. So I started taking the research up seriously, and my first project in 1990, I did ferrocement fins, you know, long sun-breaking things. And then, of course, I was, meanwhile, again, this is inspired by also Roman bricks and all that, frankly. My house, wall house. And I started also doing research on all kinds of materials like terracotta. How can they self-support roofs? Because potters needed money and there's no livelihood. So I started taking any material and make architecture out of it. Why I'm showing this one here is because if you look at the ceiling, I was investigating forms and form work to make concrete, and that's where the two are linked. The concrete, like Nervi was trying to make a form work, it's very difficult to make shells and everything because the form work, we don't think about it. But in fact, that is the problematic thing. I believe that it's because the form work is so complicated for shells and efficient engineered concrete was not being done because the form work is complicated. So from the beginning, I started looking at how the form work for concrete could be easy to pour. So I started using the pottery to just make waffle slabs easy to cast without expensive formwork. And that's why I started using the pots that people couldn't sell to be able to use them as a prefabricated lost shuttering elements, yeah? And so, you see here, you save 65% of the steel, because normally every 10 centimeter or 12 is a steel bar, and through this method, like a Nervi version of a terracotta application. So you create this kind of ceilings which are very thin. And then these are ferrocement, screens, and trying to use, I was thinking in the future, instead of saying mud is good, cement is bad, let's use all the materials, yet remain clever, take twice the time to do a work, and use at least half the material, and build twice the square meter. So these are the challenges I put for myself. And so through this kind of investigations in all kinds of materials, I started, I also built, this is a town hall for Auroville, and I started building big span structures with these type of combinations, and even the railing is ferrocement, actually, in the town hall complex. So, and then it comes to, so this is Auroville, where I've built various things, but this is one very purely concrete building where I used the optimum form by making ferrocement lost form for the beams. Because if you want to save, instead of 125 cubic meters, I managed a design by doing 3 or 4 repetitions to use only 75 cubic meters. So I save 50 cubic meters of concrete. And that was possible because, look, the beams are not rectangular. It's got the exact parabolic shape that you need, etc. But to build that, I had to cast, this is a thin ferrocement mold, a thin, long mold. And then I could have a huge span. And these are carried by humans. I feel so cruel now. But I managed to build through human, I started realizing use human resources, and then you can save natural resources. Because we were all the time being told we are a poor country and this and that. And I said, you are only poor. I came to know I'm a poor country only when I went abroad. When I was there, for us that was normal. So I didn't feel poor at all. I just think that you feel poor if you use the thing which you don't have. If you use what you have a lot of, you have a lot of people, you use the people. You have a lot of time, you use the time. You have a lot of mud, you use the mud. Then you are rich. So this is the next step, is I realized how to optimize and build even more efficient ferrocement. I started to refer to origami and other folding techniques, because as I told you, that to make a shell, the form work is very expensive to make the form. And I thought, if you make a faceted shell, then you can cast it on this Amazon packaging or things like that. I didn't know COVID was going to come and all this will increase. But so such a form work, recycled carton, is because ferrocement is so thin, I started thinking about disaster relief. We had a tsunami. So I thought, how can you make forms which you can collapse like that, open it, and and the same way the mesh can also be packaged and folded and brought. You see how little steel is there, and you can get a shelter. In this whole thing, it took me 4 years to research, but to build it, it took me 4 days in India. And it's so cheap, really, that a person can actually afford it. So that's all. And then I started moving to prefabrication ideas, and I thought that if masons could produce components in their backyards, then in the weekend, you put in 2 hours, you make one piece, then you can build your own housing. So I started testing colors, and like this, you have this stucco, I started putting pigments on them, so you don't need any finishing, and you have a very soft waxed finish, and you can use this modular housing, and this is some of the pieces that I have shown.
That was the Biennale.
And yeah, that was the Biennale in Venice in 2012, and this was in Louisiana Museum. And I want to make a piece, something like this for you to add, for the pieces you have there, just so that you can see how the 3-4 layers work. So I started experimenting all this more carefully. And I brought teams from India, masons, to Germany, not to be told how to do it, but to test, because empirical knowledge is dismissed in the world of man-made laws, and I want to just test the actual strength of what they did. So we did all of those tests, and we found out how it is not breaking, but only bending. So it's got a seismic property that is unprecedented. I seriously think this material deserves a very serious research. And yeah, this is also the Biennale, and this is the actual toilet cubicle, the first one. We have just got the roof there to show how thin the element is and how big it can span, you know. So that's the toilet element. And this is after we left Venice, we gave these pieces to the community in Marghera, and we actually reassembled it for the migrants, for adding to, with the Re Biennale people there. We recycled it. So I just want to end, I think, here, and I just want to say, yeah, that in this exhibition, I had produced, here I have only shown ferrocement, but there I showed all kinds of, there were broad 6 categories of research, from clay, stone, and all. I made a catalog of all the material groups, and in all of them I showed the strategies for the future of engineering research, which is about investing human resources to reduce natural resources by human ingenuity and help the evolution. So I think I end with that, yeah. So that is the piece. We managed to bring it here to you.
The best I can do is simply to give the word to our audience. I think there are interesting topics. I like following your trajectory. The first one is the importance of a context like Auroville, where the political urban idea of the city is important. But then on top of this, you start to discover the power of materials and of the making condition. And then you connect this to the European construction culture through your experiences in Europe and your time in Berlin. And then now you have to address, you can do big buildings and you can do public space. So I think it's a very nice trajectory. E chiederei, I would ask our friends if they had to ask some questions, so if they're more interested in the constructive aspect or the social aspect or this ecological, alternative ecological approach. So, chi è che vuole fare una domanda?
So first of all, thank you very much. It was a short but very, very intense little lecture. So I'm really pleased to be here and to know you personally. I like very much your work. Also, I like the way you invite us to look at contemporaneity and actuality in a way which is maybe completely different from what we might have heard and believed from the global, I would say, value. So this idea of time, taking time and losing time, which is not a loss of time. I think it's really interesting. And I think we have to learn this also in our Western society. And I believe that this is what, you are saying that not because you only come from a country where, and you work in a country where you, in fact, you have this resource, but I think it's a resource that we have to look and to find also in our, in our context. Of course, I think that this idea of sustainability that you are talking about, which is a very general word and very also globalized word. I like very much the way you understand sustainability. I was wondering how much, first of all, this material, you use recycled material, how much it is also recyclable as a material. And also, yes, how much you believe that in Western society we have to introduce and to learn from, because in a way it's an interesting cycle. You come from Nervi, you import Nervi in other culture, and then maybe we might learn from that culture back in Italy and in Europe, in Western country.
Yeah, I think Nervi is a really good connecting point, because his connecting point is the engineering. And what I always keep hearing about building cultures, as if there are two worlds, the developed countries and the developing countries. It's just made up in our head. It's not true. I want to challenge that also, because there is only one species called Homo sapiens, and there is only one law of gravity. You can change your bylaws in all the countries. I had a lot of arguments when I was in Venice.
I know a lot of Homo non sapiens, but that's
What I mean, see, the thing is, it's the universe. If you zoom out, we are more common than we are different in reality. Even over time, we have not biologically changed so much. Only 100 years of industrialization, and we are living in some new universe in our own narrative in our head, which is not helping us, I think. Because the thing is that when I was building this in the Chipperfield Biennale, 1 volt, the engineers, they will allow different things or not allow the same things which their own ancestors have done, and we are still doing. So they say, because in India, when I go to Germany, they say, because you're in India and they don't have regulations. But come on, it's not like that. Because if I go to a doctor, they're not going to say, are you African? I only treat Germans. It's not like that. We are the same people. We have the same emotions. We are the same law of gravity, the same tsunami. It will have the same impact on you and me. If I'm in Germany, I don't need a balcony. It's because I'm in the cold. But if a German goes to India, they will also sweat. It's not like Germans don't sweat and Indians sweat. It's all, I feel, a very narrow thinking. So I don't think materials behave according to which race are using them. They have the same law. It's nothing. The same properties. It's just in our mind. And I think the difference, I feel, between the developed countries and developing countries in the mindset is that I feel in our countries, we know the difference between human law and natural law. Our approach, my approach is, I will surrender to the natural laws, like climate. I know that I can wish rain, but it won't happen. I surrender to gravity. But I've seen my students, they challenge gravity in their renderings. So we naturally surrender to natural laws, but we question the human laws. But in the West, I found, because of industrialization, they don't question the human man-made laws. They take the man-made law as if it is written in stone. We have to question how will there be evolution? All the new materials are entering the norms, because they are, even the robotic things and very high-tech, because there's a lobby behind it, and they did the work, and the laws get changed. We used to smoke everywhere, now we don't smoke. We are every day changing laws. In Copenhagen, bicycles are more important than cars. But in our mind, in the building laws, we think that, I have a project in Africa, I'm going to do a dome out of earth. I'm saying, please, the density is very high. If I'm going to go to India and Bombay, they say, no, they are building foreign architects, they come to Bombay, they want to build in clay. But India, I'm exaggerating. I'm exaggerating, but why not to exaggerate? Because I have to make the point that in our country, the density is so high that if you limit yourself to the technology and build in clay, you will do urban sprawl. So where will be the land for the food? So I am being accused by the people today that I used to do very ecological work. Why are you using cement? And I said, but I'm still using 10% of the cement you are using. Because you say, but I'm not eco, so I can use everything. And you are eco, so why are you using cement? All this, we are not thinking deeply about a thing. I'm trying to solve a problem. There is going to be a new appreciation of cement. When there is climate change, we have to be waterproof. Cement is not bad, If we didn't have plastic, we would not manage COVID. The point is, just because you use cement, should every park bench be made in concrete? We have to think where you use what. And regarding how it degrades, you are asking, it doesn't degrade as well as mud. But when a ferrocement breaks, I have a film on YouTube somewhere. When you break cement and concrete, you will see the concrete will break into large pieces and fall on people. The ferrocement has a mesh, so it's like the safety glass in a car. If you break it, everything gets caught inside the mesh. So first of all, it's not heavy. There's many advantages, but it's got the disadvantages of cement. It's not going to be just absorbed like mud. But I don't like to have a black and white judgment about things.
I mean, this is a very intense conversation, so anybody can come in, because we are used. I mean, we did this Technoscape exhibition because and there is people here who worked in the women exhibition. There's people here who work in the engineering show. Because we think that this is a moment, one of those moments in the history of architecture when the engineering thinking and the architecture thinking can collaborate. No?
Exactly.
This happened in the beginning of modernism, it happened maybe in the high-tech, maybe now we need to fuel and support this interaction between people who think of structure and people who think of building, because exactly we have to address in a non-demagogic way this idea of sustainability. So I think your contribution is very useful from this point of view, and it also helps us to connect these two exhibitions we want to keep connected somehow through your work. Yes, you said already, what do you think when we go to... I built a mud building in Senegal when I was young, so but there was a concrete soul inside, hidden somewhere, I have to say. So what is your idea? I mean, how this idea of sustainability you have applies to the city, I mean, to the urban scale, that's thing, and to the public scale, to the urban scale?
I think actually for me, sustainability is a word that is only there because of the things we do which are not sustainable. I think it's a wrong word. It's not a scientific word. I shouldn't say it. I will be misquoted for something like that. But what I mean is... in this day and age, it's okay. There will be some debate always. But the thing is, sustainability, I cannot say this is sustainable because nothing is sustainable. It compared to what? But I can say that something is not sustainable. So we can say, more scientifically, you can say, if you are spending so much, it's not going to be sustainable. So I think that industrial age and the unconscious use of things was not sustainable. That doesn't mean that there will be a certain consumption. How much food should I eat that is sustainable? For that, you will have to do so much mathematics that it's not a precise thing. So for me, even so, what I would call sustainability in that sense is to use just consciously as judiciously, but also I don't have a guilty feeling, towards it. Because I say, come on, I am alive and I have to live. So we have to live, and life lives on life. The point is, I had not, in the beginning of my career, followed any sustainability. It was the media who were calling my work sustainable. I never was using that word. I felt that I have a respect for all the materials. I have a respect for knowledge. I have a respect for my own life and my time. And I want to not produce anything that is not very good. So I was trying to only keep a standard, and I valued beauty after Bauhaus and everything reduced to the max. And that's what is the engineering point in my work, that if you can bring out the minimum that you need and to use the most clever, ingenious way, then you showcase what is possible. And it's always a research. So it was more for me to research and strive for using even less material. And for me, the using less material was not out of a guilt. It was out of revealing the true beauty of every material and to be able to see what is holding what and how a piece is sitting on something, whether you need it or not. Then how I apply to the city today is, I think, the most important, when I'm now as the head of urban design in Auroville, I believe that old European cities or any old pre-industrial cities where we used to walk a lot, that is the key. Because the more you walk, the more you have a human scale, the more the cars don't come and divide your street. You reach everywhere in 15 to 20 minutes and you don't sprawl. And in today's world, the only difference is that India, look, not only India, but India has 1/6 of the world's population on 2.4% of the world's land. It's not a thing to ignore. So only India and China, we are 1/3 of the planet population. So the whole world's population is increasing. So the only change, why I don't want to look back into walkable cities like Venice and even Rome, it's a big city, but it's very walkable. It's designed for the human being to feel well and not for the car, first and foremost. But that is the way forward. But the reason I cannot look at past examples is because we will have to densify. If we want to have agricultural land, we will have to go higher in our buildings, and about 7-8 floors up, after which it's not enough anymore for our population. We need to go higher. How do we preserve the human scale inside those tall buildings? And how does a tower, which the whole world has done, has nothing to do, it's airdropped random anywhere, nothing to do with the urban fabric. So what I'm trying to do in Auroville, and I think this is the question for all architects in the future, how to be tall. And it's a question, for me, sustainability is a question of the human scale, how to design horizontal movements inside tall buildings that nowhere you are more than 6 or 7 floors with social spaces. I'm designing a project like that, a big 8,000 people project. I think achieving human scale, if we manage it, automatically the distances will become small, things will become sustainable, and you can, to spend for high-tech engineering and some materials, it is worth it, because if you spread it out, what you spend in the infrastructure, I've done the math, it is much more. It's not fitting the green image.
That's a big dilemma, no? Always.
Yeah, it is exactly, I think, and for me, yeah, the sustainability discussion is actually in the inside intricacies of each specific site-specific solution, and not to forget the standardized, easy solution, and to say, that's the way I would say.
Avete domande? Anybody wants? Because I have many. Yes.
Oh, thank you. So it is.
Say who you are.
Yeah, I wanted to ask.
Caterina.
I'm
Caterina.
Francesco, a PhD student in landscape.
Yeah.
It is a pleasure to meet you, and it was an interesting lesson on how to use a new material, natural material, in a new way. We saw that you and your team tested the level stress of the beam, I think. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering how we can use in building in Italy, and how this material, this structure, respond to earthquake.
Okay, so earthquake, I can give a specific answer. Definitely it has very strong seismic properties, but there is a lot of tests to be done, because I said it depends which mesh you used, which angle you used it. There is a welded mesh, there is a expanded mesh, there is a hexagonal mesh. So there's so many variations in this design. I think if serious research is done, which should be done, the problem, Mike Schleich, there is a video I have somewhere with Mike Schleich discussing the engineering options for the future, and he said that one problem is elements like ferrocement, which have got seismic properties, are very hard to circulate in the current contemporary world because of the norms. They will not be, it's harder to standardize. Just like a brick building, like if you need to build like Notre Dame, it's not, you can't give us a simple code for the arch. It is require a lot of calculation. In those days, the engineers didn't do the calculation, the masons and the craftsmen, based on empirical knowledge they were doing. And in today's world, empirical is discarded. So this is the problem. So even if we will take 3 years as a PhD to prove that water is wet because of the language inside it, no? So that's why the problem of sustainability or unsustainability is very fast, but the solutions are slowed down by the post-industrial, I feel, the norm and the method and the building insurance and who will be blamed if something happens. But if you leave that part and you just investigate the engineering, then you will see that it has very many properties. So one of the properties not good for European context is the climatic expansion and contraction, and that if it is used as a single shell, it's very thin, so it will be not insulating. But I was asked by Mike Schleich's engineers at that time to ignore the thermal aspect and first solve the gravity and how to stand as a stable structure, because inside there are all these many walls. The skin of the building is only one layer. There's so many things in housing you can apply for all the walls and for everything else. So there is already a lot of potential. But for double, you'd have to do something about insulation if it is on the external thing. In olden days, the norms for the climate were less, So, I'm sure nobody asked Nervi at that time those kind of demands, He managed to produce things in his context. So I think people have to also question the norms to some extent when they see that these kind of buildings, that the comfort standards are so high that actually nobody can afford this life. Most of our salaries going into rent. At some point it will crash. So then at least some of us, if we do this work, we have some things to go forward,
Avete domande?
So many thanks also. My name is Lidia Gasparoni. I'm coming from Berlin, from the Technical University. I have one general question. What is your relation to form, to architectural form? Because you are now explaining your relationships to structure, also concerning to climate change, to sustainability. What is your
Are you asking me if form follows function or the other way around? No.
No, I don't think, not
No,
in
I'm
this
joking.
paradigm, but it's really interesting to get a little bit this insight into your work, because your work is also very interesting approach to form. And the second specific question maybe, because you are really also approaching to research, and it's also so interesting that in your work you are showing that you are also developing so many researches also on architects and on structures. And for me the interesting question, so really I'm curious to know which are really your media practices developing researchers. When you develop researches, are you working with models, with drawings, with structures, with engineers, with kind of labs?
Very
So what
nice
is
question,
your
I have to say.
way
I'm so happy, and very unusual question for me, which I'm so happy to answer. So I think for me, I said about form follows function because I met a biologist once who told me, why do you architects think form follows function? Because in biology we say the function follows form. Because actually the form is, suppose it's a cylinder, there are things it can and cannot do. Everything that exists will have a form, and it will be able to therefore do or not do something. And so when I used to hear that debate also about form follows function, I think nothing follows anything, because the moment a thing exists, it exists integrally. Like suppose I, as a being, my body is only my physical expression, it's my materiality, but I am not my body. And who I am, I'm not my only soul, my soul and my body coexist. So what came first, chicken, egg? Of course, I think egg came, but anyhow, but I mean, they together exist. So I always looked at architecture through a holistic lens, and I believe in the spatial research. I always used to believe that architecture's central issue is located in the design of the void, and the material is only there to hold it. I always thought humans, humans can only inhabit the part you didn't build. So I was interested in that. But because in our times, materiality of architecture has become such a big challenge, it is creating social, economic, and environmental huge challenges. I paid special attention, and I was very surprised to be first recognized for the material contribution. But actually, if you visit my architecture, you will see it is the feeling that I'm trying to, through the space definition, transcend the material experience, like in us also, you know, whenever you feel good or you look for, I don't know, beauty or anything that moves you to silence almost, it is material, but you transcend the materiality, like by music. The violin is also material, but what you produce can make you transcend the material. But having said that, I think form is a very sacred thing, but my starting point of architecture is the synthesis of everything. The form, material, the problem, the time aspect, the past, the future, all those things, the holisticness. So as a synthesizing tool, I start architecture through my most favorite subject is geometry. Because I think geometry is the one that you cannot lie about anything. Because it is the point of bringing order between the physical, spiritual, everything, the geometry. So I take from geometry, and I found out that, of course, I come from a very classical, oldest school of Bombay. So I believe in the very old school way of working. I work like that. But what I also do is I make models in all scales. I work very close to materials side by side. I do not just start an idea on a paper. When I'm drawing it in a sketchbook, in my mind, I'm inhabiting it in the full scale, you know, whether I draw a plan or something, because I have a attraction to geometry, and I'm able to read a site and a slope and all that. So that's how I start. But when I go to a place, like today when I was here, I didn't manage to see this, but I walked a lot in Rome. I was looking at all the bricks, checking the sizes, seeing how did they manage any shape with the same brick module. Today, with a brick module in Germany, you would only not do a curved thing because you use 10 modules like a Lego thing. But the Romans used the same modular element without its oppressive nature. They could build any form with that, any width, anything. So I pay attention to that. So one foot is in the ground, and the other is in the drawings. We should connect for Berlin.
I have a very, very short question, very Italian question. I'm sorry.
How do you do curry? No.
No. I'm excited. I'd like to participate to a workshop with you, with your students, for build up some...
Well, let's do in Rome. I want to come to Rome.
Yes, maybe. Could be very interesting for
See,
all
my
of
friend
us.
Lucia is here. I've been telling her today I have to find some excuse to
Yes.
come to Rome,
I
and
think
she has to help me to facilitate that.
Yes, we can organize. Lucia and me are close friends.
And otherwise, also, of course, you know, if anybody wants to go to India or be part of any other workshops,
so.
then you have to connect with me somehow, maybe on Instagram or something. But yeah, Rome is definitely a place where
exciting. Yes, but my very Italian question is, which is your relationship with the site? Is it something that you need to investigate at the beginning in terms of site? I mean, a landscape situation or an urban situation, it depends. But you need...
Yeah,
Yes.
I wanted to say a little bit, if I cannot use...
Yes.
Yeah, I will give a non-Italian answer to this, okay? Because, I mean, I think site is very important for me, because I believe you have to be anchored on the spot. You know, even my technologies, the materiality is to do with what was available in the place. So for me, I don't have a theoretical, like when I compare to precedent studies and things that are done in Italy, I'm saying, I think personally for me, all that is very overrated, because, for me, okay, because I grew up in a context where past knowledge would not suffice. It doesn't, it's important to know what our ancestors did, but what they did is not going to work for us. And the rate at which the future is advancing upon us, all these old knowledges, I don't think they are going to save us, to be very honest. So I believe much more in, I don't want to be pushed by the future to take one step, from the past to take one step. I want to be pulled by the future. I want to take future precedence. So my most important tool is my imagination. I like to imagine. I tell my students, imagine, but you have big dreams, but we'll have to learn how to realize the dream, not to produce all things for the paper looking nice for our community and putting it in the drawers, no? So I mean, sight is, for me, sight is the physicality, but sight is not only theoretical. It is the materials, what is on the earth, what can I take out of here? If there are trees, I can build with trees. If there is ice, I have to build with ice. You know, that is also the sight. Material and skill is also the sight.
Good. Ultima domanda, faccio io. Can I ask a cheeky question?
Of course.
I
don't have to answer,
I think we have many German presences here now.
Okay.
Friends from the Villa Massimo, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the attitude German architects, or German, at least academics, have in Germany towards this idea of sustainability is very strong, very like mainstream, no? Green.
I'm trying to show.
Very green, I would say. You seems to look at it in a different way. So is this why? I mean, I remember Denise Scott Brown in Venice looking at the work of our students, PhD students, and say, "Come on, stop with all this green. Nature is not green. Nature is brown, is black, it's dirty." So, I mean, how do you feel compared to the academic world in Germany? And is this why? I mean, we have a Mike Schleich installation in the other room. Is this why? Is it maybe sometimes easier to talk to engineers or people who approach the thing from a different point of view?
No, I mean, I have to say,
like a bastard
it's okay,
question,
no
right?
problem. You know, I live in Germany now, but I'm not German, as you can see. The Germans claim that they feel very restricted in their norms and so on. Wherever I go, all the debate is about somehow the norms don't let us this and that, let us innovate, for example. So I do feel the Germans feel very restricted in the building culture they have now. I don't feel restricted
Italians too.
because Italians also feel. So, I mean, the reason I don't feel restricted is perhaps two things: that I don't feel anxious to build in Europe, you know. This is maybe why, because I'm try to be present where I am, and there are so many things, I'm not bored, there's so many things to do, and there's so many things I can do in other places. I don't have to prove anything to get to build inside. I think life is short. You have to like what you do. You have to really like what you do. And up to now, I managed to get away with not doing a job that I don't like. So why should I start? This is a cheeky answer.
I completely agree. Grazie. I mean, do you want to say something on this?
No, and therefore, I have to say, therefore, in Germany, what I enjoy doing is teaching. And maybe I could be a bit controversial as a teacher also.
We all are controversial by definition. We are architects.
I want to empower the next generation, at least my students. I say that please do ask the uncomfortable questions. Please question every assumption. Because that is the problem, that people don't have the courage to question. They know, you know, earlier the problem of sustainability was, I thought, 30 years ago when I graduated and I started my practice, I thought that maybe we don't know how to do things better, so we do this. Today my approach is different. I think we all know what is good and bad. Every child knows it. The difference is, knowingly we are doing, like you work in any big company, even in Starbucks, I don't know. You may know better how to do a coffee, but they won't let you. and you let them not let
That's
you.
interesting.
So why are you doing it? You can choose not to do, oh, because I don't have money. One day more you wait. You know, I was also young. I had to pay my own life. I did all those decisions walking on the tightrope. And it's not that often Germans feel that because it's in India, I did this. You go to India, go to Bombay where I come from, that's not how the people build. You know, it's because every minute to minute, every action you do or don't do, it will determine your fate and what kind of ancestor you will be for somebody. And I think life is too short to remain dumb and have your hands tied up in chains for nothing. I used to tell myself when I was very young, when I needed the money to live, because in India I was stepping out, living on my own, you always can wait 1 week. You don't have to compromise in advance. Already as a student, people are not taking risks. So what will they do later? I want to empower the people. So what I'm doing sensible in Germany is teaching.
Okay, so we'll close the day with this "life is too short" sentence, which all agree.
Yeah.
We all agree, and we thank you very much. Grazie. It was
Thank
a beautiful.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone.
Very nice conversation. Grazie.